Hello, welcome back to this specific YouTube channel. I am Sydney, and I wanted to talk today a little bit about the reading year that I had in 2025, and then mainly focus on my reading goals for 2026. I was initially thinking that this video would be kind of in conjunction with like a top favorites of 2025 sort of video. I've been struggling with that though, if I'm going to be really honest. I went and I looked at all of the books that I'd read this year, and about four like really stood out to me. And there was beneath that this like massive tier of books that were like really good, but didn't really stand out as much as those top four. And so I don't really know. I could do a video on just those four books, but I don't know. I kind of envision this being like a top 10 or top 15 situation, and I truly don't know how to separate out 6 or 11 more books from the maybe 20 or 25 that is kind of in that tier, like just below the like cream of the crop. So I don't know, maybe I'll do some like March Madness style brackets or whatever. But I did at least want to talk a little bit about the reading year that I had in 2025, so you can kind of get a better sense of where I'm coming from on my goals. Because it's, great. I can say, like, oh, yeah, I want to do more of this. It's like, okay, well, how much of that did you do? Did you do any of that? Like, how far, like, how much of a stretch is this goal? Um, so I did want to talk a little bit about that. I have some kind of stats up front for you, and then kind of throughout as they become relevant, I will talk about other kind of like reading stats for this year. I did make a spreadsheet of all of the books that I read this year. I don't know if that's ridiculous. I do have to do a lot of spreadsheeting in my 9 to 5 job. I wouldn't say spreadsheets are a particular passion of mine, nor would I say I'm an Excel wizard, but they can actually be pretty useful in like kind of like holistically looking at data. And while I have Storygraph, which does do a lot of like data, it doesn't have like a complete view in what I am looking at. And there's some kind of flaws. Like, for example, page number. They will include all of the like random like like the copyright page and like the acknowledgments and like thank you so much to David for helping me edit this and like whatever in the back, and like the questions for your book club and whatever. And like I will read an intro and an epilogue, like don't I'm not that's not what I'm saying at all, but I counted the pages up until the last page with actual like story on it, and I guess unless there was like an actual like afterword that was worth reading. Because if there's like 20 pages of like fluff that I didn't bother reading in a book, I'm not going to include that, and that's going to kind of skew my average page number. Okay, so according to my spreadsheet that I kept, my average number of pages that I read was 279.8. I'm just including the point 0.8 because I'm like, I could round up to 280, but I don't know, that feels weird to me. The median number of pages was 252, and the shortest book I read was Chess Story by Stefan Zweig, coming in only at 84 pages, and the longest book I read was Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, coming in at 713 pages. Now, going on to date of publishing, I averaged it out, which I don't really know how like useful that is, but like the average year I guess was 1990. It was like 1990.1. I don't know like if average is really like a useful data metric in part of like year published. But I clearly did read a lot more modern stuff than classic stuff because my median year was 2018 and the mode was 2024. So do with that what you will, I guess. The oldest book I read was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which was originally published in 1818. Was it published or was it just written? I don't know. I included, if there was a book that was like written and then like published for the first time like 30 years later, I included like when it was written instead. And then like the newest books I read all came out in 2025. I could go through and name them, but there was several and I don't know if that's necessarily important. Um but yeah, and then one of the other things I do keep track of on this spreadsheet is nationality of author. So like where they were born and raised, where they have citizenship. And I keep track of that, even though like, Storygraph and stuff doesn't. I didn't really aggregate any data on that. I did try to calculate the mode with the function at the bottom of the column, and it kept saying like error. There was like no repeated values, which I don't know if it's just thrown off because it's like words and not numbers, but like definitely there's a lot of nationalities I read from multiple times. So I don't know, like this is actually a Google Sheets, because I can't deal with the Microsoft Suite when I'm outside the four walls of my office. But I don't know if Google Sheets is just drunk or if it's just because there's because it wasn't numbers. I don't know. Um, but whatever. I keep track of that. I guess it'll become relevant when I start talking about my goals. But just in general, like that is a way that I try to diversify my reading intentionally. I think that it's really easy to get stuck in books written within the Anglosphere. Even if you're not just reading books by Americans, you're probably reading, and I say probably, I mean like I don't know you, I don't know your life, but like a lot of people are reading books that are written like within the Anglosphere by Americans, whether it's US Americans or Canadians, and people from the UK, just, you know, the Anglosphere. So I think that if you want to read truly diversely, poke your head outside of the English speaking bubble, and then also make sure you're poking your head outside of like the West as well. Um, anyway, so those are my reading stats. Hopefully, people didn't click out of the video like too much because, God, that was probably a lot. Anyway, so my 2026 reading goals I have written down here. I don't really want to focus on like the number of books that I read so much. Last year, I think I read 57. Um, I know some people read a lot more than that. Some people read a lot less than that. You know, I feel like 57 is a pretty reasonable pace for me, considering I have other hobbies. I have friends. I have, family that I like to see sometimes. I have a job, whatever. But I don't really want to focus very much on numbers. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to read 100 books or whatever," and I think that's great. If that's you. I don't want it to feel like the reading Olympics. I feel like there's a lot of discourse online, and I've been trying to stay away from it, honestly. But I have heard that there's a lot of discourse about like, oh, you can't possibly read that books and like whatever. I don't really care. I don't really care because I'm not really competing with other people to be like the world's best reader. So I don't care if people added something to their Goodreads that was like an audiobook they listened to on 3 times speed while they were like doing other things, because like I'm not competing with them for like most books read or like best reader ever award. Like I don't um I don't care. Would I implore them to maybe assess why they are doing that and whether or not they're getting something out of it? Yeah, but like I also don't run their life, so whatever. So I set a goal of like 45 books. My goal is obviously very easily attainable. Like, I don't think I was reading at a pace that I can't sustain this year. I have read more books than that in the past, more books than like my 57 this year in the past. And, I've read less. Like, when I was in grad school, I think I only read like 30 books a year because grad school. But I just setting my goal as 45, so I'm not like worried too much about the number. I guess I could always raise it if, come October I've already hit that and whatever. But again, I'm not going to focus on the number. I'm more focused on the content of what I read rather than the amount. And with that being said, let's get into the rest of my goals. I would like to read 6 books over 500 pages, with one of them being over 1,000. This past year, I made it a goal to read 6 books over 600 pages, and that simply didn't happen. I still would like to push myself to read more longer books because, yeah, they do scare me a little bit, they intimidate me a little bit, and I have so many books that I want to read to the point where it stresses me out, to the point where I'm kind of avoiding book content recently because I don't need more suggestions of what to read. I have so many suggestions, too many suggestions. And I can read, like 3 200-page books in the amount of time that it would take me to read one 600-page book. And 3 books checked off my list versus one that makes me feel a lot more calm. But because this is not a numbers game, and again, I would like to focus more on quality rather than quantity, I would like to read at least 6 books over 500 pages. I'm reducing that number because I read a number of books that were like 400 pages, but I don't think I read like any books in the 500-page range, because by the time we get to like 450-ish, I'm kind of scared. And I think I read one book that was like almost 500 pages, but everything past that one book that I think was 490 pages was over 600 because that was my goal. So I'm reducing it to 500 because that is a size that is still intimidating to me, but it's not like, I don't know. I need to work on that. I need to work on that little bit of intimidation. I said I would like one to be over 1,000. I do know what that book is going to be. I was going to try to get to it this year. It just didn't happen. That is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is a classic, and it is chunky. It is like well over 1,000 pages, and I'm intimidated. I'm scared. But basically, everyone who has read this says it was fantastic. It was well worth the time they put into it, and it did go faster than they expected, just because it was a really engaging story that they did want to just keep picking up over and over again. So I'm trying to just get over the fear and just finally pick this up. I got this copy at my local used bookstore back in November, and I really thought, I was like, I'm gonna pick it up before the end of the year. I'm gonna do it because I'd already been saying for a few months that I wanted to do it, and I was just like waiting to find a good copy that I wanted. And I did, and I still have yet to push through that fear. The other books over 500 pages that I would like to read, one that I'm in the middle of right now is the Iliad. I'm reading this with a friend. We are going through it pretty slowly. Initially, when I picked it up, I was like, I can read this before the end of December and therefore the end of the year. No, you can't. No, you can't, because life is happening and whatever. And also, like, you're not trying to get so ahead of your friend who also has life happening and whatever. But yes, I'm reading this with a friend. We're going through it pretty slowly. And I'm going through it. You can see I have 2 bookmarks because several hundred pages of this is just like notes on the translation. And I do want to read that. So I'm like reading like a book, that's what they're called, like a chapter, and then I'm going back and I'm like reading all of the notes that the translator left on, like, oh, like I chose this word because like whatever, and like explaining a little bit of like background knowledge that you would need to like fully comprehend the story. So I'm like reading the chapter and then like filling in the gaps at the end. um so it is a little bit time consuming. Like, I don't pick this up unless I have like an hour to dedicate, because I do want to be able to read like both sections before I put it down. But yeah, this actually hasn't been that intimidating, and this is kind of like busting 2 fears at once, like the fear of really big books and also the fear of stuff that is like ancient. This like hasn't been that bad. I'm not scared or intimidated anymore. I think I will probably be pushing myself to pick up some more ancient classics this year as well. Although I don't have a specific goal for that. That is just kind of something that I'm like kind of keeping in mind. And lastly, I would also like to read East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is another just like classic that I can't believe I haven't picked up already. This copy that I have is like 600 pages, pretty much exactly. I considered reading this at some point this summer. It just feels like a summer read to me for some reason. I actually don't know if there's any merit or truth to that, but something like that's just like a vibe that I'm getting. So I don't know. There is a good chance that I pick this up sooner than that, but if not, I will definitely try to get to it this summer. Um, these are the only books I'm going to be holding up, by the way. The rest of this video is just going to be talking. I just felt weird not holding up any books at all. But while I'm holding up books, can we appreciate my manicure for a second? It's like, look at that. Hopefully the camera's focusing. Um, I got this manicure done by my very talented sister. So, unless you know me in real life, I'm sorry. I don't think this manicure will be available to you. You just have to also find a sister who has a good eye for these things and good fine motor skills and a lot of nail equipment. But yes, let's just take a moment. Anyway, so moving on to my next goal, I do want to take some more risks. I noticed that I've gotten pretty good at choosing books that I'm probably going to like, and I've also really narrowed down my reading focus to mostly just classic and lit fic, and that's great. I want to keep reading mostly classics and lit fic, but I think I've kind of like forgotten genre fiction a little bit, which can also be a good worthwhile reading experience. I did used to read like a decent amount of fantasy and sci-fi, and I feel like I've kind of gotten away from that. And I used to also just kind of like try to branch out. And I'm not talking about like my intentional, wanting to read diversely from different countries and like whatever, what have you. I mean, like just like diversity in like the type of book. I have this little tradition for myself every year where I start the year with just like a, I don't want to say trashy thriller, but a thriller that really exists for basically just entertainment value. And I like binge read it over the course of like 2 to 4 days. And then I like move on with my year. And kind of reading that book made me realize I was like, yeah, I think I need to like kind of just go to the library and pick out a random book more often and just read that if the premise sounds interesting, because I I think a lot of my like reading choices have been like kind of like well researched and whatever, and that I think is partially what's made it so difficult for me to like look back and determine like which books truly stand out from the rest, because like a lot of them are just like really good or like pretty good, and I and it's hard to distinguish because I'm like comparing like actually comparable books, and I can't look back and be like, oh well, like this was the best sci-fi book of the year that I read, so I'm gonna include this in my like top whatever, or like this was the best fantasy book that I read, so like I'm gonna include this, and like oh this was the best book in like genres that I don't typically ever read from. Um, but I don't do that. Like I didn't read like any like romance books this year. That's again not my top genre, but I used to just kind of like, like randomly read one sometimes just cuz I don't know, sure. Why not? Um but like let's see. Is it going to be good? I don't know, we'll see. Um and I do just kind of want to get back to that a little bit. Is that like I don't want to be reading a ton of books that I think I'm going to hate. Like I'm not going to read a book if it's really buzzy just because everyone's saying it's bad. Like that's not, I'm not going to put myself through that. But if there's a book that a lot of people are talking about and it's really controversial, and some people who I kind of have overlapping taste with say it's good, and other people I have overlapping taste with say it's bad, like yeah, maybe I'll pick it up. Maybe I'll take a risk. I'll take a chance instead of playing it safe. And then hopefully I can look back at 2026 and I don't know, have more peaks and valleys rather than just kind of like a consistently good, because you think consistently good is where you want to be, and maybe for some people it is, but like I don't know, there's just like not as much fun in that. I don't, whatever. Moving on to the next, I do want to read more from my local library. I definitely have been reading more from my local library. I just read a library book for my like thriller to start the yearbook. I have another book that was recommended by the librarian that I have yet to read. Like while I was there, like picking out the thriller. I have a nonfiction book that I'm reading from the library, and I just like the library is a fantastic resource. If you don't have a library card, I recommend going to your closest library and taking one out. It's free. It is completely free. And is it less convenient than ordering books from bookshop.org or barnesandnoble.com and having them sent to your house and you can read them whenever? Yeah, it is. But it is a community resource that you should probably be, I don't know, utilizing. And it'll probably save you some money as well. So, in kind of the spirit of like taking more risks, I definitely want to. If I'm taking a risk, I'm going to get it from the library, and I think I did a bit of that this year. Like some of the books that I was like a little bit on, like I just got from the library because I was like, you know what, if I hate it, send it back and it was free and whatever. But yeah, I libraries are great. They're probably underutilized. Don't let the allure of having like a really extensive bookshelf get in the way of your financial goals or the support of your community. A lot of libraries are part of a larger library network, and you can get books that aren't there. I grew up in a pretty small town, and even though there wasn't a ton of books at that library, we could get books from the neighboring towns and whatever. Like you could do it online, or you could go to the library and be like, hey, like, does anyone on the network have this? And you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Like it's gonna show up on Wednesday, and you're like, great. So I recommend you do that, even if you think that your library will be small and crappy. Like there is like a chance that it is connected to a lot more, and then even outside of the like general like local network of libraries that you might have, like the librarians might be able to just like find stuff for you. I have a friend who is on a particular mission to read a very particular book list, and some of them have been difficult to find, and he has been able to go and just like talk to the librarians, and they've been able to send um books from outside our like usual network, from other states, from across the country. I think recently they were sent something from like the Library of Congress that they have to read in the library only. It's a whole thing. I don't know. I don't have to go into that. But yeah, like your librarians can find you stuff. And while I do want to, you know, curate my own home library, I do want to continue to support authors, to support publishing houses that I like, to support um, my local used bookstore. I don't want that to get in the way of also supporting my library. So my goal this year is not just use the library more. I'm sure I could figure out how many library books I read this year and then just like say like, you know, five more than that. But I don't want to buy more books than I take out of the library. So if I buy 10 books this year, I want to, you know, read 12 from the library or something like that. Um, so that's kind of like how I'm quantifying that goal rather than just kind of like having it be vibes based. And that's also something, if you're having an issue reaching other goals that aren't just like read 50 books, like try finding a way to put a number on it, because if it's just vibes based, then it's not going to happen, babe. Probably not anyway. And then lastly, my last goal for this year is that I would like to read books from 10 new countries. I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of all of the countries that I have read books from. Right now, I'm in the middle of reading a book from Uzbekistan that is the first book I'm ever reading from Uzbekistan, and it's like really complex and it's taking me a lot longer to read than um, I anticipated. I've actually been reading this since before Christmas on and off because whoa. But it's been rewarding, and I don't know if I'll count that in my 10 because I'm like almost done with I was almost done with it when the year started, and I just haven't made any progress on it in the last few days. But I do have faith that I can find 10 more books. I already have a number of books on my shelves that are from countries that I haven't read from before. I don't think 10, but I do have some books in mind that I have not yet obtained that I might be able to get from the library or, purchase or whatever. So, yeah, that is that. Um, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I hope that you had a wonderful reading year in 2025. And I hope you read some fantastic books in 2026. And I hope I do too. So that's all from me for today. Peace, I guess.